Tantor Audio presents Heritage of Cyador by L. E. Modesitt, Jr. Narrated by Kirby Heyborne. Prologue. From the low rise where he is reined up, the Mirror-Lancer undercaptain glances eastward to the Swarth River, slightly more than 500 yards away, its waters far lower than usual in the hot afternoon, an afternoon more like late summer or early harvest. Then his eyes turn westward, taking in the open lands, whose grass is dry and brown and barely calf-high. More to the north are the few scattered plots that have brought forth little enough from the drought-plagued past harvest. Less than a K behind him, beside the small stream that flows down the middle of the swell between the rolling rises, is a scattering of cots and hastily built shelters, structures thrown together by the people of Ensenla after they had fled the town of the same name, a town less than 2 Ks north of where he waits, a town burned to the ground early that morning, and now marked only by trails of smoke rising into the silver-hazed green-blue sky. Roughly 50 yards in front of him is a single post, stained a faded green. There is another such post a 1/4 K to the east, overlooking the river, and another a 1/4 K to the west, and that line of posts extends a good 10 Ks west of the river, perhaps farther, since the undercaptain has not measured the precise distance they extend in the 3-8 days since he arrived to patrol the area. The undercaptain studies the lay of the land and the approach to the rise, knowing that a full battalion of Afritan guards rides toward him in 8th Company. They are less than half a K to the north, just out of sight on the dirt road that has linked the burned-out town to the Cigoernian hamlet of Pennica for the past 20 years. The undercaptain continues to reach out to the skies, frowning as he does. Still, there is enough moisture there to continue to create the clouds he would prefer, but does not need. "Sir?" asks the senior squad leader.
5 companies. They're riding up the slope just on the other side of the border. They'll want us to stand aside so that they can slaughter the people who fled. We can't let them do that."
"Strange that the Duke isn't here, sir." The undercaptain knows that the senior squad leader is suggesting a withdrawal might be in order.
"It's better that he isn't."
"Begging your pardon, sir."
"The blood won't be on his hands."
The undercaptain is being obscure, but he also knows that obscurity will serve him and the Duke far better than clarity in the matter. The Afritan battalion appears at the north side of the top of the rise, perhaps 200 yards from the undercaptain and the senior squad leader. The Afritans continue forward until the lead riders are within 50 yards of the border post, and the line of 5 companies abreast comes to a halt. All 5 companies reform into a 5-man front, then dress their ranks, and even their files. An armsman carrying a white banner bordered in the dull crimson of Afrit rides forward, stopping just short of the border post. The undercaptain motions for him to proceed, even as he separates order and chaos in the air above the rise, watching as the cloud above expands and darkens slightly. The Afritan rides forward, reining up 10 yards short of the Mirror-Lancer undercaptain. Neither speaks, but the undercaptain gestures. The Lancer clears his throat, then begins.
"Major Ehram is pursuing traitors who have rebelled against his mightiness, Duke Atroyan. He would appreciate your not impeding his duty. These are the lands of Duke Kaitran. While we understand the Major's desire to do what he perceives as his duty, our duty is not to allow the armsmen of another land to murder and ride down those who have fled to Cigoerne for refuge. I am commanded to inform you, Undercaptain, that you and your men will be treated as allies of those who are traitors if you stand in the Major's way."
"Might I ask if Arms Commander Ramuel accompanies the Field Commander?"
The Afritan armsman does not answer. "Surely you must know," prompts the under-captain.
"The Major has the authority of His Mightiness."
The under-captain nods. "You may inform the Major that we will not harm him or his men, so long as he does not cross the border into Cigoerne. My mirror lancers are posted 100 yards south of that border."
"The Major must insist on the right to bring traitors to justice."
"He has the right to bring them to justice in Afrit, not in Cigoerne. That is the rule in all lands, and that is the agreement between Duke Caedron and Duke Troyan. We will enforce that right by force of arms, if necessary."
"The Major has declared that he will pass."
"If the Major crosses the border with his battalion, we will enforce our right to protect ourselves."
"Then the Major says you will suffer the consequences."
"So will he, and all his men." The under-captain glances at the small but thickening cloud that is gathered partly above him and mainly over the center of the rise to the north of where 8th Company has reined up, arms ready. Abruptly, the Afritan armsman turns and rides back to the massed formation. The under-captain waits.
"Sir?"
ventures the senior squad leader. "Have the squads hold their positions. I'll give the order if we need to attack."
"Yes, sir."
While the senior squad leader relays the order, the under-captain concentrates, extending his order senses and beginning to create order lines as parallel as he can make them to the dancing chaos within the small thundercloud overhead, a cloud that darkens moment by moment as raindrops begin to fall across the top of the rise. A trumpet triplet sounds, and the Afritan battalion starts forward at a fast walk. Carefully and precisely, the under-captain eases apart order and chaos in both the air above the advancing Afritans and in the ground below them. The Afritan riders break into a canter as they pass the faded green boundary post. As he senses, with what he thinks of as brilliant light, the interplay between a deeper level of order and chaos, an interplay within all things, the under-captain begins to separate small bits of order and chaos in the ground under the mounted mass of Afritan riders. Seemingly just before, but in fact a calculated time before that point where his separations would unleash massive power, he limits the separation and creates a quadruple 10-line order coil with the power going into a shielded circle around the Afritans. Lightnings flare from ground and sky in a pattern that crisscrosses men and their mounts, galvanizes blades with such force that they are ripped from the hands of men who do not even feel their death. Thunder with the force of mighty winds slams into everything within that fiery circle, and the charred fragments of men and mounts are thrown to the ground, consumed almost totally by flame, and then covered with fine ash that is all that remains of the browned grass of harvest. The under-captain shudders in his saddle as a wave of silver gray flows over him, a wave unseen by any but him. His eyes blur, and tears stream down his cheeks. His head feels as though it is being pounded with a wooden mallet. He squints, enough to sharpen his blurred vision so that he can make out what lies before him on the top of the rise. All that remains of a battalion of mounted Afritan armsmen is a circle of ash and blackened ground some 200 yards across. The senior squad leader gapes, then looks to the under-captain, his mouth open, but wordless. "The skies and storms favor Cigoerne," says the officer. After a long silence, he adds, "Have second squad continue the patrol. The other squads will return to our camp. We need to tell the people of Ensenla
that it is safe to reclaim what they can from their old town. They're entitled to it. They've little enough left to their names.
Yes, sir.
The rain is already beginning to let up as the undercaptain and the bulk of 8th Company begin their return to the temporary camp and post in Ensenla, a post that the undercaptain knows full well will soon become a large and permanent base for protecting the northern border of the duchy. 1. Lerial looks up from the half-written report before him, thinking, Saltarin, if you only knew how all your efforts to improve my writing with precise statements are being corroded by the requirements of being post-captain. Then he concentrates on the words he has just written. The Afritan guard continues to patrol the top of the ridge 1 k north of Ensenla. They occasionally stray across the marked boundary. They do not stay on the south side of the boundary for long, and they refrain from crossing when a Miralancer force larger or roughly equivalent to the Afritan force is present. He shakes his head. They're not quite taunting us, but what can you do? At the same time, he worries about what he writes, because he had earlier sensed, not that much after dawn, a number of riders leaving the Afritan guard post to the north, and now he waits for his scouts to return and report. Lerial glances from the dispatch he is writing, the required summary of 8th and 11th Company's evolutions and other events occurring over the previous 8 day, to the dispatch he had received 2 8 days earlier. From Jallet, Commander, Mirrorlancers. To Lerial, Captain, Ensenla Post. Date, 3rd 2 day of winter, 593 AF. Subject, Border Patrols. Please find attached a map of the border between Afrit and Cigoerne, as agreed to by Duke Kydron and Duke Troyan. These borders are to be respected. Duke Kydron has affirmed that no Mirrorlancer company is to cross them, even under extreme provocation. All officers and squad leaders are to be familiar with the borders and to conduct patrols in such a fashion that no Mirrorlancer evolution can be taken as provocative or as an encroachment upon Afritan lands. Duke Troyan has issued a similar proclamation to the Afritan Guard. Should the Guard inadvertently trespass, all Mirrorlancer squads and or companies should offer the Guard the opportunity to retreat before resorting to arms. That opportunity need not be offered should any Afritan force commence hostile actions on the lands of Cigoerne. If such hostile action is commenced on the lands of Cigoerne by Afritan or other forces, whatever response may be necessary shall be determined by the officer or squad leader in command of the Mirrorlancer force so attacked. In no case, however, shall a Mirrorlancer force knowingly enter the lands of Afrit. The sole exception to this directive is that a company commander or more senior officer may commission a force to recover Mirrorlancers carried into Afritan territory. Any attacks by Afritan forces are to be reported expeditiously to Mirrorlancer headquarters, as are any border crossings for the purpose of recovering personnel. Such reports must contain the time, the location, and the complete scope of forces, both Mirrorlancer and others, involved in the action. Lerial returns his attention to his own report and continues to write. A third of a glass later, he signs the report and eases it aside to let the ink dry before folding and sealing it for dispatch. He considers all that has happened over the past 4 years, and all that has not, ever since the people of Ensenla all fled Afrit over less than an 8 day, and subsequently rebuilt the town, or much of it, in the Duchy of Cigoerne, and then demanded the right to continue to till their lands and tend their flocks on their ancestral hills. Duke Troyan's response had been quick and disastrous for the Afritan Guard.
Lerial shakes his head, recalling the events that followed. Thankfully, over the last 4 years, he has not been required to use such force. The upside of the effect of such a storm has been that Duke Troyan could suggest that the deceased field commander had been unwise to attack in such weather, and lay the blame there, with no word about the fact that the Duke himself had ordered the attack, while his brother, the arms commander of Afrit, had been either inspecting the ironworks at Luba or ill with a severe flux. At least that is what Lerial has gathered over the years, from listening and from veiled hints from his Aunt Ameria, who has her own sources. But the downside of letting a freak storm take most of the blame for the deaths of over 500 men is that at least some officers in the Afritan Guard are wagering that such a freak storm is unlikely to occur again, and they are tired of being restrained from pursuing the growing numbers of refugees who have fled to Cigoerne, many of whom have been skilled crafters. Nor has Duke Troyan grown more patient as time has passed, which is why Commander Jallet issued the order that rests on Lerial's desk. It is also why Lerial has insisted on training one squad from each company to use horn bows similar to those used by the Verdun Lancers, even if it took some pressure by his sire to get permission for that, and well over a year of training. Lerial has no desire to unleash the power of unbinding, linked order and chaos again, and he has been fortunate in not having to do so. But how long will you be able to refrain? Cigoerne has grown to almost half again its size in 5 years, and places like Penica, the new Ensenla, and Tylen, as well as others that had been barely more than hamlets or small towns, now are far more than that, and the factors in Cigoerne have added 2 more river piers to handle the trade from all over Hamor, and even from Kandar in Ostra. A rap on the study door breaks through his momentary musing.
Yes? Captain, the watch reports the scouts are at the crossroads.
Thank you. I'll be out in a moment. Lerial checks the dispatch, thinks about folding and sealing it, then snorts softly. No point in doing that until you hear what the scouts have discovered. Or not. He rises and leaves the study, stepping into the small anteroom of the Ensenla Post Headquarters building and walking to the duty desk.
Sir.
The duty ranker looks up. I'll have something later for a dispatch rider. Let the duty squad know.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Lerial then walks out into the cold wind blowing out of the southwest and stands waiting for the scouts to ride into the post and report. He does not wait long. The 2 mirror lancers in their greens and heavy riding jackets and gray gloves rein up outside the headquarters building. Both have red faces from the cold and wind. Tie your mounts. You can report where it's warmer. Lerial smiles. He can recall every winter he has spent in Ensenla, and how much he appreciated the few days of leave spent at the palace in Cigoerne. Once the 3 are seated in his study, Lerial nods to Vominin, the former Verdun Lancer who transferred to the Mirror Lancers as soon as he could, even before the Verdun Lancers became Mirror Lancers and ceased to exist as a separate force. You look like something has happened. It's not that the scout looks that way, but that Lerial can sense the patterns of order and chaos that flow around him, and the turbulence of those patterns is suggestive.
Sir, almost all of the Afritan Guard pulled out of the North Ensenla post just after dawn this morning.
How do you know? Lerial grins. Or did you sneak over there?
Wouldn't call it sneaking, sir. Just rode over and asked one of the herders. Besides, there was no one about, and they do the same when they can.
And?
I rode almost to the gates. They're barred. No one's in the watchtower. No smoke from the chimneys.
No smoke in midwinter, sir? Vominin shakes his head.
What did you see, Nadar? Same as Vomanin, sir. One of the herder boys said they took 3 wagons, too.
Lerial nods slowly. After another third of a glass with the 2 scouts, Lerial feels they have told him everything they can recall, and he dismisses them. He looks to the dispatch he had written earlier. You'll need to rewrite that and send it off immediately. Why? Why, in the name of the rational stars, would Ramuel pull 3 companies of guards from Ensenla, when for the past 2 years those guards have been patrolling the border and looking for any excuse to provoke the Mirror Lancers into a skirmish? Lerial can think of only 2 reasons. A crisis in Swartheld, even an armed uprising, since Duke Troyan has been far from the most effective ruler of Afrit, or an attack on Afrit, most likely on Luba, or even Swartheld itself, by the forces of Duke Kessin of Heldya. Either of those events would be far worse for Cigoerne than another Afritan attack on Ensenla, or anywhere else along Cigoerne's northern border. Could there be other reasons? Quite possibly, although Lerial has no idea what they might be, only that it's unlikely that they would be any better than the alternatives that he already suspects are the reasons for the Afritan withdrawal. 2. By 4-day morning, just before muster, Lerial has still heard nothing from headquarters. Not that he expected a dispatch in the morning, but he had thought there might have been one on 3-day afternoon. He'd even sent lancers to check the lone pier that serves Ensenla, and the scouts had talked to more of the Afritan herders and growers, but none of them knew anything more than Lerial and the scouts. A delay in response from the commander means nothing in itself, but Ensenla post is less than a day's ride north of Cigoerne, though a fast ride to make in that time, and Lerial sent out the dispatch on 1 day. There's no helping that, he thinks as he steps out of headquarters to receive the morning reports. Both officers are waiting on the narrow porch.
11th Company stands ready, sir, reports Undercaptain Stroxon.
8th Company stands ready, sir,
reports Senior Squad Leader Feldar, who handles the muster for Lerial, since Lerial is both 8th Company Captain and Post Commander. Good. Since 11th Company is the duty company for the day, Lerial turns to Stroxon. Keep up the scouting runs on the Afritan post, and to the west, just in case the withdrawal was some sort of feint. If anything changes, let me know. Keep someone posted at the pier as well.
Yes, sir.
At the inquiring looks from the 2, Lerial shakes his head. You'd have already heard if we'd gotten a dispatch from the commander. He may not know anything more than we do. In fact, he might not even have known what we know. Lerial understands the need for following the chain of command, but there are times when not following it might result in better information, and sooner. And this might be one of those times, since it is just possible that either his father or his aunt might have information that would be useful.
Yes, sir,
replies Feldar blandly. Lerial manages not to smile, knowing exactly what Feldar's blandness signifies. At the same time, having served under Fortin, the previous commander of the Mirror Lancers, Lerial would far rather have the not terribly imaginative and very honest and loyal Jalad in that position. I'll be riding out on my own inspection in half a glass, Stroxon. If you'd have 4 Encas.
Yes, sir.
It is closer to a third of a glass later when Lerial rides out through the post gates on the brown gelding that has been his primary mount for almost 6 years, accompanied by 4 lancers. The post stands on high ground to the west of Ensenla, ground not quite so high as that of the rise along which the border between Cigoerne and Afrit runs, but with a swale between it and the border rise. As always, but especially when he leaves the post, Lerial has created an order shield that will repel chaos bolts and iron weapons, and linked it to his belt knife. Even after 5 years of trying, for reasons he cannot fathom, he has been unable to create shields directly linked to himself, and that could pose a problem at times, because the linked shields have a tendency to fade, unless renewed, roughly 2 glasses after being created. He can create momentarily larger shields, enough to protect a company for a short time, but holding them for any longer than 1/10 of a glass quickly exhausts him. You should count yourself fortunate, he reminds himself. And he should, because his father, for all his Magi bloodline, has no ability to shield himself at all, and his brother Leffy's shields, although based on chaos rather than order, are far weaker than Lerial's. Lerial turns the gelding onto the main road from the post through the town and to the river pier. Less than half a kay from the post gates is a dwelling under construction, its walls of sun-dried mud bricks that will be covered with a mud plaster when the house is completed and roofed, and then whitewashed with numerous coats until the walls are almost a shimmering white. The walls of the older dwellings, not that any are more than 4 years old, are beginning to take on a faint pinkish shade from the reddish dust that is all too prevalent in summer. As he rides into the center of the town and across the small square, he sees that the small walled and roofed terrace of the inn on the south side of the square is vacant, as it usually is in winter, but that 2 men watch from the narrow front porch. "Good morning, Captain," calls Carliot, the taller of the 2 and the son of Harush, who owns the inn and tavern. "The same to you," returns Lerial cheerfully. Carliot grins and shakes his head. Beyond the square are a handful of crafters' shops, and the only chandlery north of the city proper of Cigoerne. More than once when he was young, Lerial had questioned his father about why the city that held the palace and the duchy itself were both called Cigoerne, and the answer was invariably the same: because that is the way it has to be. Now, it doesn't have to be that way, but the habit is so ingrained that it's unlikely to change, at least not any time soon. Beyond the crafters' shops is the single factorage in Ensenla, and it is, given the herders, a wool factorage that sits almost at the foot of the single brick and stone pier extending some 20 yards from the shore out into the gray-blue water, which also holds a touch of brown. At the moment, no craft are tied there, as is usually the case. Lerial glances across the river toward the marshes on the far side, but he sees no fishermen or bird hunters there, nor any flatboats or trading craft. While he has never measured the width of the river, it is more than half a kay across when it reaches Swartheld, according to Ameria, and from Lerial's own best judgment, it is not that much narrower at Ensenla, or even Cigoerne, although it narrows considerably upstream of Cigoerne. That he does recall from the few journeys he had taken with his father when he was much younger. After a short time, he turns the gelding away from the pier and rides north along the river road, which quickly turns into little more than a trail, well before it reaches the faded green post that marks the boundary between the 2 duchies. He takes his time as he heads west along the border. Almost 3 glasses after he set out, Lerial rides back into Ensenla post, his winter jacket loosened because the sun and the still air have made the day almost pleasant. He has seen no sign of any Afritan troopers or raiders, and he has been able to sense no bodies of men within more than 5 kays of Ensenla, and that worries him. He is still worrying, sitting behind his desk and looking at maps, 2 glasses later, when the duty ranker calls out, "Sir, there's a dispatch rider coming through the gates." Lerial does not quite bolt to his feet, but he is waiting by the duty desk as a dispatch rider he does not recognize hurries into headquarters. "Captain Lerial, sir?" Lerial nods. "Yes?" "These are for you, sir." The rider hands over 2 sealed dispatches and a small leather pouch. "They're from Commander Jallet, sir."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?